Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Lili Davoudian, and I work on the Microsoft Defender for Cloud product team. I'm joined today by my colleague, TJ Banasik from the Microsoft Sentinel group. We're very excited to share the NIST 853 solution that we've recently released in Microsoft Sentinel. Our plan for today is to discuss the solution and then jump into a demo. Let's get started by reviewing the NIST framework. NIST 853 is a security compliance standard created by the US government. It provides a framework for selecting and maintaining security and privacy controls for information systems. Given the evolving threat landscapes, and especially the threats that we've seen to US government systems, it's necessary for these organizations to protect the integrity of their environments and the data within them. Federal government systems are at increased risk due to the sensitive and critical information that they store. And with this understanding and this awareness, it's really what led to the creation of NIST 853. The goal of this security compliance standard is to improve risk management for organizations that process, store, or transmit information. And it does this by establishing a set of standards and practices that help organizations manage cybersecurity risk while still enabling business efficiency. All federal agencies must comply with NIST guidelines, as is the same for any personal or business entities that are contractors to federal agencies. We see that a lot of government frameworks have a grounding in NIST. For example, FedRAMP, which is commonly used to provide a standard approach for kind of assessing and authorizing cloud computing products and services, is based in NIST 853. The Azure Security Benchmark, which is our default baseline for assessing posture in Microsoft Defender for Cloud, is also mapped to NIST. And I say this to show that even if you're not in the US government space, there are benefits to using this framework to track your posture and to minimize risk. So our two main takeaways for today are, if your organization is tracking compliance relative to the NIST framework, this solution provides a single pane of glass for monitoring, measuring, and improving compliance for your multi-cloud workloads. Second, even if you're not in the US government space, NIST is a great framework and starting point to understand your security posture and to work to minimize risk. The solution that we've created is really grounded in the Microsoft compliance ecosystem, and we have a lot of great tooling that we tap into. The Service Trust portal has all of the details about Microsoft's implementation of controls and processes to protect cloud services and the customer data within them. This is a great starting point when you're beginning your compliance journey. An M365 Compliance Manager, which is really designed to help teams meet policy and regulatory compliance initiatives. It's another great starting point for customers who are looking to drive compliance of your cloud workloads. And here you can enable the Microsoft Defender for Cloud initiative and get that continuous assessment and recommended actions mapped to controls. In Defender for Cloud, you can use the Azure Security Benchmark and other regulatory compliance frameworks that are natively integrated to Defender for Cloud to quickly understand your security posture and where to act to harden your attack surface and minimize the likelihood of threats. And finally, you can bring this all together with Microsoft Sentinel. Here, you can deploy the NIST workbook, and you can stream all of the rich telemetry from the Microsoft ecosystem and from your third-party tooling into Sentinel to really get that holistic view of your security posture and use continuous monitoring to understand gaps over time and minimize risk. So with that context into both NIST and into the Microsoft ecosystem, I'll talk a little bit more about the solution and then we'll jump into the demo. So first, we have a Sentinel workbook, which is really a dashboard visualization that provides a starting point for security teams to design and report on compliance posture relative to the NIST framework. This allows you to assess your posture by taking data from across Microsoft and third-party tooling and feeding it into Sentinel. What's great here is that in addition to leveraging telemetry from over 25 different Microsoft products, you can also bring in your third-party tooling. And on top of understanding your multi-cloud posture, we can also look at the story across tenants using tools like Azure Lighthouse. Continuously streaming all of this rich telemetry into Sentinel and mapping it to the controls in NIST allows for a very comprehensive understanding of your organization's security posture relative to the framework. On top of this, we have an analytic rule, which assesses your organization's posture over time relative to the NIST controls and alerts you on deviations. This means that your security teams don't have to be in the tool 24/7. Microsoft products provide continuous monitoring on your behalf, and we will alert you if there is a deviation. Through playbooks, you can even set up automated responses when deviations do occur. What's great about the playbooks is the consistency that they drive and their ability to alleviate the load on your security professionals. We've found from talking to customers time and time again that there is a lot of telemetry and a lot of data across the Microsoft tools and ecosystems. And what we've done with this solution is taken that data and those insights from our entire suite, from third-party tooling, from on-prem data, and really turned it into actionable insights that empower your security teams to act, to remediate, to harden your surfaces, and to really drive compliance and minimize your attack surface. This results really in a one-stop shop to consolidate data across the Microsoft and third-party ecosystem, and to map the telemetry these products gather to the NIST framework and controls. This creates a workbook with hundreds of visualizations that each have the ability to filter as needed to your organization. These visualizations are based on pre-written KQL queries, but with one click through our parameter filter at the top, you really have the power to filter down on one or a few subscriptions or to expand your scope to multiple workspaces over a long stretch of time. This ability to customize really empowers organizations to understand their posture as needed relative to the NIST framework. We see implementers jumping into the workbook to understand how to design the environment to meet various NIST controls. Assessors can leverage these artifacts in support of an audit or to share with regulators. Analysts can tap into the analytics rules to provide that monitoring over time and to understand where they may need to respond to prevent against a threat. And finally, we have a really great print to PDF feature that allows you to easily share the findings of this report with decision makers or others who may not be in the portal. And this is really how we see organizations building security into their roadmap and being more proactive about hardening their attack surface. So we're really excited about what this solution can do for organizations who are driving compliance against NIST and other entities who are just looking to secure their cloud workloads. And with that, I'll hand it over to TJ to show us a quick demo.
Hey team, I'm TJ Banasik from the Microsoft Sentinel product group. Today I'm going to walk you guys through a demo of this offering. So I'm going to start by accessing Microsoft Sentinel, and the first step is to onboard the content. I'm going to move down the content blades into Content Hub, which provides a one-stop shop to deploy this content. I'm going to search for NIST, and I'll see that I have a few options in here. This is where I find the 853 solution. If I've already deployed it, I'll see view details. If I'm doing it for the first time, I'll see install. I'll have a few options as far as where I'd like to install it. I'm just going to select all the defaults from our demo environment. The name is standardized and the rules are pretty straightforward, so it's easy to follow the prompts in order to get started. Once I've set the configurations, it'll do a validation to let me know if there's anything that I need to change. And then I'll click Create. That will lay down the content into Microsoft Sentinel in several places to allow me to approach this from a domain-based solution. So it already exists in my demo environment. I'm not going to do it twice. Next, I'm going to show you guys the core of the offering, which is the workbook. So I'll go up to the workbooks blade. I'll select my workbooks to show the ones that I have deployed. Searching NIST SP 853 brings up the workbook that was deployed into my workspace. I'm going to pan right to View Saved Workbook. This brings us into the content. So the first thing that I'd like to call out is getting started. It's important to review all these prerequisites in the first time that you get started with the content. There are things that you need to do to be able to use it to its fullest, including turning on the policy assessments in Microsoft Defender for Cloud, regulatory compliance initiatives, and a few other things to ensure that your workspace is healthy and reporting as needed. We're not going to go through these in detail today, but I just do want to call that out. If it's your first time deploying the content, make sure to follow all the prerequisites to ensure you're in good shape. The parameters allow us to select all or maybe just some of our workspaces. This is really beneficial when you're working in a cross-tenant or a multi-tenant environment. No additional configuration is needed. It's bound to Azure Active Directory, role-based access control. So if you have the visibility to see multiple subscriptions, you're going to have that option to see your data here as well. In my time-based parameter, so as we look at the content, we'll see that we have the control interface, and this is how we navigate the offering. Selecting any one of these tabs will give us a sub-workbook visualization. If you want a full audit of your environment, you're able to select everything and then print off a PDF, or maybe you just want a component of it for an executive summary, and you have that option as well. So we'll start there for an assessment. So I would use this the first time that I look at one of my cloud, multi-cloud, on-premise or hybrid workloads, just to get an overview status of how the environment is doing. So that's where you'll see this posture assessment section. So you'll notice that currently systems and communication protection is what we have selected, but I have the option to look at everything in the framework or maybe just something specifically. And so when I readjust that to all, I see the status of my controls by control families within NIST. And if you're curious to know, is this NIST 853 Rev 4 or Rev 5? We've put some work into that to ensure that this offering will cover both ends of that component, regardless of which revision that you're using. This is important because it provides a uniform policy assessment. You'll notice that this is the same policy that we're pulling from Defender for Cloud, so you will have parity in how you assess it there. It will also align to the Service Trust Portal audits that Microsoft has attested to, and the M365 Compliance Manager assessments as well. So you're seeing different components of the same story, so you don't have to worry about so much rationalizing that. You'll see it in a singular place. So the way scoring is conducted with these visualizations is if I have a policy that's applied against 3 assets, that would be a score of 3. If those assets are passing, that would be green. If they're failing, it would be red. And so I can see that systems and communications protection is where I have the widest array of policy assessments and also need to spend a little bit more time there. So currently I only have 27% passing of my assets in that control family. So that's definitely something that I care about. And as I roll down, I'll notice that I see the individual policies that are being applied. So what I'm going to do is say, I don't want to look at everything, maybe just a focus in the area of interest. And we'll see that these are all the policies that are related to the control family. The one at the top is operating systems and data disks should be encrypted with a customer managed key. And you'll notice that I have 103 policy assessment failures. So we're not going to provide a recommendation without the ability to action it. So you notice that in this and the majority of the panels in the workbook, you'll see a blue deep link to remediate. Now what this does is moves us into the Defender for Cloud product. It provides the assessment of unhealthy resources and the ability to action that. So if I have the rights to make the change to be more secure, which is a little bit more common in smaller organizations, I'd be able to do that here. If I don't, at least I know where I can go to request a change and document that within my configuration management. You also notice that when I click go back, I'm still in the workbook. I didn't need to authenticate. I didn't need to go to another tab. I'm still in the same place in the workbook. So it's very important for us to make that story easier for you guys as the customer when you're using several products, to be able to tell a very singular experience and to be able to stay on track with what you're interested in assessing becomes important. Opening up multiple windows can become a little bit cluttering. So we want to ensure that you're able to seamlessly navigate this workbook and keep your place when you want to come back. If we roll down, these are all really cuts on the same data set. It's telling me the who, the what, the when, the where to help me build a better knowledge of the control assessment. And so if I want to know which assets are impacted the most, that's what this panel will show me. So I can see that I've got an on-prem SQL account and it's only 33% compliant. So if I want to just go to that asset and I had the rights to get to it, this would take me to the asset in the demo environment. In those places, I'm able to make the configuration changes and go a little bit deeper into an asset that may not be compliant with my needs. Here on the right is an assessment over time, which measures configuration and compliance drift. Anytime there's a recommendation, it's a score of 1, and this becomes an aggregate. So on the 13th of April, we had 63, 65 recommendations. Something was changed in the environment insecurely. It was adjusted within about 2 days, and it peaked again. This is enabling our decision making to say what changed insecurely. Ideally, this line stays as flat as possible over time. When you see a spike, that should trigger your compliance and engineering teams to look at that and say, we need to ensure that things change securely and maintain that stability, through an audit and beyond. So a lot more active as far as not just doing an annual compliance audit, but monitoring the live status of these controls over time through their life cycle. We also have analytics rules that I'll show you after this. And so when the environment changes, you don't have to stay in the workbook with your eyes to glass at all times. An alert rule will trigger to notify your monitoring teams that something has changed and put them on target in order to move towards remediation solutions. So this provides an executive summary type report. Note that Microsoft Defender for Cloud also has an executive summary type report. So you have different options as far as what you'd like to hand off to your auditors or your leadership, your CISO. You can use this version in parallel with a more polished PDF from Defender for Cloud for executive reporting. We've got the details on how to do all of those within the README. Just wanted to kind of reinforce that anything that you're showing on screen builds a custom report that you're able to hand off as an artifact or a plan of action and milestones to media control or basically a component of an SSP. So very versatile in what you can do, but keep in mind that it's designed in the primary use case to rapidly provide you with a report and a view of your environment or your larger multi-tenant and multi-cloud environment. So now that we've moved beyond the assessment phase, I want to get a little bit deeper into one of these controls. So if we see right here, configuration management is one of our control families within 853. And selecting that will bring us down into another visualization which shows all of the controls. But keep in mind that we are measuring logical-based controls, things that you can see within a cloud-based environment. So if you want to know how does that coverage break down, feel free to check out our documentation. It's deep linked throughout the workbook. So if you have a question as far as why are we doing it this way or that way, you're able to view that for each one of them. And so for configuration management, selecting this will also bring us to the governance guidance within NIST. So I'm able to take that a little bit further. But what I want to do is go over to one of my controls, system component inventory. So hardware and software management is something that takes a good degree of time. And we want to ensure that we provide all the tools to allow you to do that in a singular place, really to spend your time deciding if this control meets or doesn't meet your security requirements. So we get an overview of the control. And if you want to know how does our policy align with the control, selecting the link at the top will bring you into our docs page for the policy-based assessment. and it'll land you on exactly how that we're assessing that control. So if you need a deeper understanding of how these controls and policies are being applied, you have the ability to explore that within the documentation pages. You have the control requirements. These are outlined verbatim from the government in NIST 853. So if you just need a quick reference to the control, you're able to see that here. At any point in these control cards that we show you data, like you can see on the right, that's an active panel of our asset inventory. We tell you which product that it comes from. So with a lot of products, we want you to understand them more so as a capability. You may have a compensating control or something different. So that helps you align if maybe you need to tweak the workbook slightly to do that. The cool thing about a workbook is you own the content. It's not coming at additional cost. We provide this as part of the Sentinel offering. And you're trying to get return on investment on your existing investments. So you don't need to pay extra to use the content. The only products that are required to get started are Microsoft Sentinel and Microsoft Defender for Cloud. And all the other products that you bring will provide enrichment to take that story further. And so if you decide that you want to change this, as soon as you deploy it, you own the content. All this is done within queries, so you're able to adjust it as need be. If we use different log tables and data sources and telemetry, we'll tell you which ones they are and give you a deep link to go and explore the documentation of how that data source is used if you do want to take it a tad bit further. We provide our docs pages, so if you need to do asset inventory and you're just getting started, you're designing and building the control, this brings you to the documentation page, more so a smart card to ensure that you don't need to dig through the docs. If you just want to meet this control, this is your flight path to do it. When we reference our different Microsoft products, we give you a link that will go to that portal or product page. So we don't want you to have to remember how to get to these areas of the products. When we use multiple ones, you'll always get a deep link that will take you to that product and allow you to adjust your control as need be. We have the NIST guidance. So you saw that we showed what it was. The NIST guidance is actually a lot deeper than just the control. So a lot of folks in the audit process will have either a PDF open, they're doing a lot of Control F, or they'll have a hard copy open. When I go through these, I generally will use both with a group of assessors. And so the ability to land on this digital documentation for the control saves a lot of time as well if you need to kind of get into reviewing the very granular components that are requirements. So we provided that as well, thanks to NIST. And the last component of this is your documentation. So as you're looking at these controls, you have the ability to decide when it's implemented. You can say the date that you did it. I'm going to say 4th of July, 1776. And I can put my notes in here. The plan of action and milestones. And you'll notice that that added a note into here. I didn't need to have any knowledge of how to edit the workbook. I just want to put in all of my notes that I feel are important. So the next time I look at this control, I can track it over time. I can set a project plan if I want to implement new things, or if I want to provide it to a regulator, I can reference other components like the M365 Compliance Manager assessment for NIST 853 and the STP Microsoft Audit Attestation are some examples of things that would be helpful there. Clicking save ensures that these are all saved the next time that I access it. So do keep that in mind if you make notes to save it when you do. We have our control requirement. And so when you look at asset inventory, there's so many different types of assets in a cloud-based environment. IP address is not the only thing that's going to identify an asset. We need to go a lot deeper into that. So API calls, storage accounts, automations, runbooks. There's really a lot more to that. And any of these components is going to be very critical to understand what you have because you cannot secure what you're not aware of. So in order to track down all these assets, we bring it into a singular place for you to see them. And if you want to take this further, you can either click on the asset if you are able to access that with your rights, or you can go over to our different asset inventory tooling. So here I see that I've got asset inventory for Azure and for Microsoft 365. So I'm just going to select the Azure inventory as an example. And you see this also brings us into Microsoft Defender for Cloud, into the inventory feature of that product. So I'm able to get a lot deeper with my reporting if I want to pull an artifact. I can grab a CSV here. And once I'm satisfied, I'm back in the workbook. If I decide that I want to go to Microsoft 365, I'm able to do that as well. I'll hit my demo tenant. And while this loads, it's bringing us into Microsoft 365 Defender, and we're getting the asset inventory from that tool as well. So we want to be very comprehensive. Inventory is a big thing, and I don't want to need to remember where I need to go. But when I land here, I can see my computers and mobile devices, my network devices if I have them at play, and even my IoT devices. So very versatile in getting outside the cloud, all the way down to network-based appliances, on-premise assets, bring your own device, IoT, very versatile in doing that. And so you'll notice we were able to gather a very large amount of information very quickly and efficiently. And so it's really one of the benefits of using this type of an offering. I have other ways that I could see assets. Maybe I care about my encryption assets. I'm able to see that I've got 19 of them. Clicking into this will allow me to see them. You also notice that we have what we call filters in a lot of these panels. So the reason we do that is we don't want you to have to know KQL, our Kusto querying language, if you're a new user. So we want you to be able to navigate these offerings without query. And that's where the filter becomes very valuable for you. At any point to where your users feel they're more advanced or they're good with KQL, you can jump into the KQL query for any control. And this becomes very important for an auditor because looking at a control is always a degree of speculation, of trust but verify. So show me more. Where did that pretty visualization come from? And so every one of the visualizations we show you, you can go to the raw telemetry if you want to see more or if you want to explore further and understand really what you're seeing on screen. That's an example of configuration management. So I could print that as well if I wanted to show that. But this offering is a lot more versatile than just policy and configuration. So I wanted to take one more slant before we move on into incident response. So incident response has quite a few controls. I'm just going to select incident handling. So how can this offering help me with incident handling? You'll see a very familiar story on the left with our control card and how we can get started. I'm not going to walk you guys through that again, but you'll notice on the right, we're now using different data to tell us about incident handling. So what we're using here is Microsoft 365 Defender and Microsoft Sentinel security incidents. And so this is showing us that we are in fact doing incident response and we're capturing incidents. And in the event that you need to look at one of these incidents, you're able to drill down into it. So I can see that I've got a case to where a user is logging in from different countries, possibly an impossible travel scenario. I can see the case number and it's a high severity, so something that I care about. I can now investigate the incident from a singular place. And that's where we're evolving from just compliance into an operational tool. And that's really what we're focusing on with Sentinel is if your requirement is to do incident response, you can show that, but your responders can also use this in the course of their duties for that. So now we've landed on Microsoft Sentinel incidents, and I'm able to investigate the 5 Ws of what's going on. And if I decide that I want to go a little bit deeper, I'm able to see a graphic visualization to understand what's going on. If I decide at a certain point that I've got a concern about this user and how they're interacting with my environment, I can even trigger playbook automations to say I need to block that account or see that user or explore this event just a tad bit further. And so that becomes a pretty powerful story as well. And I don't want to get too lost in the automations, but just the understanding that if I see something with an incident response, it's that fast. That click right there will block that user account and remove them from my cloud environment. So I'm not going to click it now because I really don't want to expel that user from the environment. But when you're investigating, you're basically from a control into an investigation that fast. So very versatile as far as what this tool can do. But I decide that I want to go back and just click the links at the top. That's just an example of how we would use this for something like incident response. So the last two things that I'm going to show you are the other pieces of content within the offering. So we have an analytics role and 3 SOAR playbook automations, which are brand new with this offering. I'm going to roll down the left to Analytics, search NIST, and you'll see that I have a rule in here. It's already scheduled. It's called 853 posture changed. If I go to edit, I'm happy with the naming. So this is the KQL query. What it's going to do is use the Microsoft Defender for Cloud policy for the 853 initiative. My configuration posture changes. I'm measuring the drift. So by default, it'll run once a week. You'll notice that I ran a machine learning data model on the right. And so what that's doing is telling me how often it triggers over time. So you notice it only triggers an alert about once a week, and it'll tell me that different control families are out of compliance. It's designed not to be too noisy for your team. So it's at a 70% compliance baseline with that policy. Over time, you'd want to increase that. And you may decide that once a week isn't fast enough. Maybe you want to see it once an hour. It's really up to your team, but that's how the default is. And anytime you want to change the details of that query, you're able to pull that from here. And all of it is built on raw telemetry. So if you want to see the query and how it executes, that's what I see now. So at the very top, I see that access control is currently at a 68% compliance rating. So I've got work to do, but I'm able to rapidly get an assessment of how I'm currently doing in that control family. And if I want to drill down, kind of like we did before, I've got the links to pivot through the workload. That's an example of how we use the rule. The last thing I wanted to show you guys is the automation that comes with the content. So we have 3 of them that are in here. One of them is a notification playbook. I'm not going to demo that one because we've showed that in some similar content packages. We've got 2 other ones for configuration management. One of them is create an Azure DevOps task, and one of them is to create a Jira issue. So when you're in your monitoring team and you see that your policy is deviated, you're probably not going to have the rights to make that change. And you probably shouldn't just make that change, because that's why we have a lot of challenging configuration drift in the cloud, is people see something and change it without documenting it. And so what we really want to help you guys do is document it. And keep in mind that we've put just 2 or 3 of these in here. Those are just the ones that we recommend. The library of automations is far and wide with the ability to configure. And so when my policy deviates and I receive that alert and I'm emailed and a Teams page tells me, something's happened, your configuration is drifted, I also want to have an automation that will run and automatically ticket that to my engineering team. Like, I don't need to do anything. The alert will trigger on increment, it'll notify me, and it'll create a ticket to make sure that a human doesn't even need to be in the path. They will be tasked, and then the person with the appropriate access and within our configuration management policies can go in and make that change the right way. And so the way that this automation works under the covers is this easy as far as putting together an automation to save time. And that's really what we're trying to do, is take the human out of repeatable tasks and put them on more interesting things like investigations. And so when an incident is triggered, which we have configured that I showed you with that policy, you're going to connect to my Azure DevOps board. And I want you to create an incident with all the details that we have from this alert here. And so this is configured into the alert that I showed you. And then anytime that alert triggers once a week, you'll be able to have a documented step that changes are needed. That's what we have for today's demo. Definitely look forward to working with you guys as a community and building this offering. Please do check the link at the top of each one of our workbooks for feedback. It comes directly to our team. We really want to partner with you guys to really identify the future state of this offering. So thanks so much for the time today, guys. Back to you, Lily.
Thanks, TJ, for a great demo, and thanks everyone for joining. Get started today with the actions on the screen. If you jump into Sentinel and through Content Hub, you can deploy the solution. And as TJ mentioned, we welcome all feedback as we work to improve this offering over time. Thanks, everyone.